Almighty God, touch my lips of clay, that my words may not just be my words, that today we may hear your gospel afresh. In Jesus' name, amen. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get thee behind me, Satan! Get behind me, adversary, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." There is nothing more aggravating and demoralizing than having spent days or weeks building yourself up to a great and terrible disclosure, like a cancer diagnosis, or even coming out of the closet, and having it shot down by well-meaning loved ones who hope that beating it back into the shadows will make it to be untrue. I've seen very sensible people descend into fantasy when faced with an otherwise overpowering reality. My aunt and her husband, my aunt who many will remember, she passed away just over 2 years ago now. My aunt and her husband heard the doctor say that my aunt's cancer would be cured and was probably not serious, when her daughter, who was in the same room, heard the doctor give a terminal diagnosis. They were absolutely sure that the doctor had told them that it would be okay. They told my parents that it would be okay. But my cousin, who was in the same room and who was a nurse, heard the doctor give an unequivocal terminal diagnosis. This fantasy is not serving truth and not serving the person who is sick, as it can endanger those precious days when we are aware of our end and yet still able to reconcile, to love, and to prepare. We see only approaching brick walls, and no matter how deep our faith, we seem often unable to allow it to comfort us and carry us through the impending crash into clear air and clear skies, into new hope and the abandonment of the wreck and the body wrapped in pain. We just see the approaching smash. We have no thought to how we will get out of it. It seems to us that death is, if not a punishment, then certainly an end. And we behave in our lives as if that was the case. We fail to believe our own propaganda. And we then feel abandoned by the gospel message that would seek to give us light and hope. Now, Jesus knew, I am sure, if only through the eye of faith, that apokatastasis, this wonderful Greek word which is almost impronounceable, apokatastasis, which means the healing of all things at the end, was the inheritance of all things. The healing of the sundered and the separated, and the gathering in of the lonely and the scattered. The making new in the arms of God. This is apokatastasis. Now that faith, and really it had to be faith, not certain knowledge, otherwise Jesus would be other than human. Because faith is our inheritance, not certainty. So that faith would not in physical terms diminish the power and the pain of a single stroke of the flail which Jesus was approaching, but it would open the soul to the lively hope that the cross was not Sheol. It was not the place of death and disillusion. It was not the place of all ends, but was a place where cleansing and easing and that deliverance and hope could be found in the place of bones, the place of the skull, which Golgotha was known, the place of the cross. That we could be recovered from deep in the miry clay. Now, Eastern Christian tradition has Jesus himself accomplishing all this. As I've taught many times from this pulpit, one of the most common icons to be found in the Eastern Christian church is the harrowing of hell. We had this come up in Bible study just a few weeks ago. And it shows Jesus descending into an open pit and bringing up into the light by the wrists, dragging Adam and Eve as a symbolic nature of man and woman, of humanity, dragging them up into the light. And sometimes you wonder whether he is not dragging them despite themselves into the light. Because there doesn't seem to be much choice involved. He is literally lugging them up from this big pit like they were sacks of potatoes. It is the conscious healing of things that don't even know that they need healing. The comforting of things that don't know that they need comforting. The mending of things that don't know that they are broken. That is the harrowing of hell. Now, we who feel ourselves up to our waist in this miry clay need to understand that the clay in the metaphors of the Bible and in the metaphor of my sermon is not necessarily representative of wickedness and sin. The clay is not, however, a comfortable element. But then again, neither is the vast abyss of the deep ocean. Now, why do I bring that up? Well, the deep ocean is a place of terror and death for us. It's inhabited by eyeless monsters lit by the phosphorescence of creatures that have never guessed at the sun. You see, I had a poetic spell when I was studying the beauty. Oh, I'm going to have to read that again. Shut up. The deeps are a place of terror and death for us, inhabited by eyeless monsters lit by the phosphorescence of creatures that have never guessed at the sun. I think that was a club I used to go to in London, but still. None of us, however, would conceive that the ocean is a place of evil. It's just a place of extreme inconvenience to human beings. It is a place to which we are unsuited, yet it is clearly a part of God's glorious creation. Now, we tend to, in this world in which we inhabit, conflate convenience and comfort to the human being as being goodness and godliness and the divine. And frankly, that's clearly not the case, because God, in God's infinite wisdom, also invented such creatures as fleas and tapeworms. They're not creatures of the devil just because they're uncomfortable to us. They're part of God's creation. And if we will live such disordered lives, that we live in places where we're likely to get such things, where once upon a time, if the anthropologists tell us correctly, we didn't, well, it's our own business, isn't it? You know, the amount of things that we say are an act of God and God's will are really our own choices dressed up as that. You know, all those people living on the slopes of a volcano and complaining bitterly when the volcano erupts and they're swept away, and you think, that's an awful thing, a terrible tragedy. Bet you were living yeah, or on the San Andreas Fault, my goodness. It gives us an insight, you know? When I was a kid, when I was back in England, we all thought anyone was nuts to live in such stupid places, you know? So we lived on our damp, rainy little island instead, and all caught chills and went off invaded half the world because we were bored of being at home, you know? It's true. Oh, blimey, anyone who wants to know why we have an empire needs to spend a winter in England.
And that's what, August?
Can be. The early part of May is summer, as a rule. So, it may be the case that the clays, and I'm using this of course as a metaphor, the clays that suck at our feet and bring us despondence and despair are just ways of being which we are unsuited to. The world we have woven is sometimes unsuited to the human soul. And when in dysfunction, it bears us down instead of raising us up. It is indeed uncomfortable to our health of body and spirit, and Jesus broke a path through its urgings and its limits, its laws and its rules, and Jesus allowed the clean water and the glorious glow of the divine to break through. The clean water that washed away that miry clay and gave us a glimpse of health and wholeness and healing and peace, all those things which we tend to think as different things, but they are all arms of the same glorious tree. Boughs of the same tree, that tree of deliverance, that tree of truth, which is that which is in keeping with God's loving design for us. Jesus wanted to speak honestly to those he loved, but he wanted to speak in the clear, seemingly cruel light of truth. Peter thought it was cruel, but it was truthful. What Jesus had been telling his disciples was what was going to happen. Peter's denial of that would have done no good. It might have made Peter comfortable for a few hours, but ultimately, what did it do? Peter's admonition was not for the sake of Jesus, but to allow Peter to ignore the mighty act of compassion that Jesus was involved in, and just to comfort himself in the short term. He was indeed an adversary. The word Satan means hashekat, the adversary, an adversary, I should say. It's not a proper name. It's a description, as is the Greek diabolos, as in diagonal, facing across from the adversary. He was indeed such an adversary, a trial to the spiritual integrity of Jesus. Now, ultimately, Jesus had his way, but the falsehood into which Peter and the other disciples retreated clouded their vision of the divine at the last, and they fled in fear instead of making common vigil with the two Marys and the beloved disciple at the foot of the cross. Their hardness of ear and heart robbed them of their integrity at the most crucial moment in human history. All would seem to be lost. All would seem to be broken beyond repair because of their poor decisions. But that's not the way creation works, and it is not the way that God works. So at the last, let us look to Dame Julian of Norwich, my favourite mystic lady, shut up in her cell next to the Church of St. Julian in Norwich in East Anglia 800 years ago. And she said, and let me paraphrase, all was well and all is well and all manner of things shall be well. Despite their indignity and ignorance, despite their avoidance, despite the fact that they shamed themselves at the cross, despite all those things, we have to believe that they were gathered into healing and wholeness in the arms of Almighty God, and all was well. Now, we also need to remember that that doesn't mean that the crucifixion did not happen. The fact is that those terrible events at Calvary were gone through and overcome. They were not avoided and walked around. They did not become a thing of fantasy. They were conquered by Jesus' acceptance of them, and Jesus' stubborn refusal to allow others to die so that he need not. That's the crux of the Christian witness of Calvary. That Jesus chose not to throw others into the path of those who would murder him, but to walk to face it himself in truth and dignity. And again with Dame Julian of Norwich, the context of her famous phrase, all is well and all is well and all will be well, is that she had prayed that Jesus would grant her the gift of sharing in his suffering, and that she may feel the pains of Jesus at Calvary, that she may make common cause and gain new intimacy with her beloved Saviour. And she was rendered sick almost unto death, and she lay in her cell in a tiny little cot, and she approached death. And it was at the point that she had been through those sufferings, and she felt the pain of the nails on the cross, and the scourge on her back, and the thorns on her head, that Jesus came to her and said those extraordinary and mighty words. All will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. It was not a denial of human suffering. It was victory over human suffering. Now, as Christians, we are prey to the same fears and weaknesses and insecurities as everyone else, often more so, it seems. And one of those is that we seek to chart a course around pain at all costs, even though it means that we shame ourselves on the cross, like Peter and the disciples. Well, we can seek to do better while still being consoled with the consolation that comes from knowing that God gathers all things God's tender embrace at the last. And we can seek to do better by overcoming our fear of pain and suffering and sorrow, overcoming our ideas that we are uniquely desolate and desperate when we feel depression and despair, overcoming our imagining that we alone suffer, and that we feel a brotherhood and sisterhood with all those around us, and we accept that even as those are healed, we are healed, and that there is nothing that this world or anything else can throw at us that comes between us